I watched the police handcuff me in front of my 6-year-old twins while my husband stood silent, his mother's hand on his shoulder, and that woman actually smiled as they read me my rights for a crime I didn't commit. But 4 years later, when the FBI exposed her entire operation, it didn't just destroy her. It ended his empire, shattered his sanity, and left him with nothing but the memory of the wife he threw away. By then, I'd already rebuilt myself into something they could never touch again. Before we go any further, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on those notifications because this story gets intense, and I mean really intense. Drop a comment telling me, have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely? Have you ever watched your life burn down because of someone else's lies? Let's dive in because what happened to me will shake you to your core. They say when you marry someone, you marry their family too. But nobody warns you what happens when that family decides you're the enemy they need to eliminate. For me, that enemy was my mother-in-law Cordelia Ashford. And she didn't just want me out of her son's life. She wanted me destroyed, imprisoned, and erased from existence. Let me take you back 7 years. I was 29, working as chief financial officer for a nonprofit organization that built schools in underserved communities across the country. That's where I met him. Dashiell Ashford, real estate mogul, self-made billionaire who turned his father's struggling construction company into a commercial development empire. He was brilliant, driven, and the first man who ever made me feel like I was enough exactly as I was. We connected over a charity gala where his company was donating funds to our organization. 8 months later, we were married in a ceremony that cost more than most people's houses. 2 years after that, we had our twins, Zion and Azara. My life was perfect, or so I thought. But from the very first day, Cordelia made it crystal clear that I was not what she envisioned for her precious son. She never said it directly because people like her never do. It was always in the little comments, the tiny cuts disguised as concern. At our wedding, she told guests I looked surprisingly sophisticated for someone from my background. When the twins were born, she asked the nurse if premature babies often have developmental delays, even though my babies were full-term and healthy. When I cooked Sunday dinner, she'd push away my jollof rice and say spicy food gave her migraines, but she'd load up on the mac and cheese and collard greens sitting right next to it. Dashiell always defended her. "Mom's just old-fashioned," he'd say. "She doesn't mean anything by it." I swallowed my pride. I smiled. I played the perfect daughter-in-law because I loved my husband and I adored our children. I thought if I just kept proving myself, kept being kind, she'd eventually accept me. I was so incredibly naive. Things shifted when I was offered the CFO position at a major international nonprofit, a $200 million organization with operations in 23 countries. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. The job required international travel, high-level financial oversight, and working closely with our CEO, a man named Sterling who'd been my mentor since graduate school. Sterling was 58 years old, happily married for 30 years, with 4 grown children and absolutely zero romantic interest in me or anyone else. But that didn't matter to Cordelia. International travel has started. Business dinners happened. I'd be in Geneva 1 week, Nairobi the next, Lagos after that. Dashiell knew everything. He knew Sterling. We'd been to their family barbecues, celebrated their anniversary with them. But slowly, I started noticing changes in my husband. He'd ask where I'd been, who I'd eaten with, why I was smiling at my phone. His tone shifted from loving to suspicious to outright cold. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and find him scrolling through my phone with this look on his face like he was searching for evidence of some crime I'd committed. Then the twins started acting strange. Zion, who was 6 years old, asked me one morning, "Mommy, why are you stealing from the poor kids?" I froze. I sat him down immediately and asked him where he heard that. He looked down at his cereal and whispered, "Nana said so," she said. "You take money that's supposed to help children." That's when I knew something was horrifically wrong. What I didn't know was that Cordelia had been executing a plan for over a year. She'd hired a forensic accountant to infiltrate our nonprofit's financial systems. She created shell companies in my name, complete with forged signatures and fake incorporation documents. She'd set up offshore bank accounts with my stolen identity information. Then she had millions of dollars in nonprofit funds transferred into those accounts, making it look like I was embezzling money meant for building schools in impoverished communities. She created fake email trails showing me communicating with these shell companies. She fabricated expense reports showing lavish personal purchases I never made. She even planted evidence on my work laptop during a family dinner when I'd left it in her study to take a phone call. And she documented everything, building a case so airtight that even I almost believed it when I first saw the evidence. The night my world ended, Dashiell asked me to come to an emergency board meeting at his mother's estate. He said there was a crisis with the nonprofit and they needed my immediate input. I thought it was strange, but I went. When I walked into that conference room, I found Dashiell's entire family, his brother, his sister, his cousins, and at the head of the table sat Cordelia with the FBI. Amara Ashford, the lead agent, said, "You're under investigation for embezzlement, wire fraud, and money laundering." I actually laughed. I laughed because I thought it was some kind of horrible prank. But then they started showing me the evidence. Bank statements with my name, incorporation documents with my signature, email chains I'd supposedly sent, financial transfers I'd allegedly authorized. Everything looked real. Everything looked like I'd stolen $8.7 million from an organization dedicated to helping children. "This is fake," I kept saying. "Dashiell, you know me. You know I would never do this. This is insane." But he wouldn't look at me. He just sat there with his jaw clenched and his mother's hand on his shoulder. Then Cordelia did something I will never, ever forgive. She brought my babies into that room. Zion and Azara, both in their pajamas, confused and terrified. And Dashiell looked at them and said, "Your mother has been lying to us. She's been stealing money from children who need schools and hospitals." Zion started crying. Azara hid behind her grandmother. And I stood there frozen, watching my entire existence shatter into pieces. "Tell them the truth," Dashiell demanded. "Confess what you did." "I didn't do anything," I screamed. "Dashiell, please. This is a setup. Call Sterling. He'll tell you." "We already contacted him," Cordelia said calmly. "He's cooperating with the investigation. He's provided evidence of your fraud." That was a lie. I found out later that Cordelia had paid Sterling's gambling-addicted brother $750,000 to forge Sterling's signature on documents implicating me. She'd threatened to expose the brother's debts and destroy Sterling's reputation if he didn't stay silent. The FBI arrested me that night, right there in front of my children. They handcuffed me while Zion screamed, "Mommy! Mommy, don't go!" They dragged me out while Azara sobbed into Cordelia's arms. And I swear on everything I love, that woman was smiling. The legal nightmare began immediately. I was charged with 47 counts of fraud and embezzlement. Bail was set at $2 million. I couldn't afford it. I sat in county jail for 3 months before my parents scraped together enough to get me out. Dashiell filed for divorce within 48 hours of my arrest. He got an emergency custody order. The judge, who happened to be Cordelia's former law school classmate, granted him sole physical and legal custody of the twins. I was allowed supervised visitation 1 hour per week while wearing an ankle monitor. 1 hour with my own children. The first visitation destroyed me. Zion wouldn't speak to me. When I tried to hug him, he pulled away and said, "You're a bad person. Daddy said so." Azara wet herself when I reached for her. The supervisor wrote in her report that the children exhibited severe distress in the mother's presence. My career evaporated overnight. I was fired immediately. My professional licenses were suspended. News outlets ran stories with my mugshot, and the headline, "Nonprofit CFO accused of stealing millions from children." Social media crucified me. People I'd known for years, colleagues I'd worked alongside, friends I trusted, they all turned their backs. Even my own sister called me one night and asked, "Did you really do it? Because I can't defend you if you did." I lost everything. My home, my savings, my reputation, my career, my children. Everything. I moved into a tiny apartment in the worst part of town. I couldn't get a job anywhere because my name was poison. I worked night shifts at a warehouse, cleaned houses under the table, delivered food using a fake account because my own name was flagged. I was making barely enough to pay rent and fund the court-mandated supervised visits that my children despised. There were nights I didn't think I could go on. At night I wrote goodbye letters to Zion and Azara explaining that I loved them but couldn't survive the pain anymore. At night I stood on my fire escape at 2 a.m., looking down at the street 5 stories below, thinking how easy it would be to just end it all. But then I'd look at their picture, their beautiful faces smiling at me from happier times, and I'd realize something. If I died, Cordelia won forever. My children would grow up believing their mother was a criminal who abandoned them, that I was everything she said I was, and I couldn't let that happen. So I made myself a promise. I would survive. I would find a way to prove my innocence. I would document everything. And I would wait for the truth to surface, because the truth always surfaces eventually. For years of absolute hell. I sold everything I owned to hire a defense attorney who actually believed me. I worked with a private investigator who specialized in financial fraud. We traced every single transaction, every forged document, every fake signature. We found inconsistencies. We found digital fingerprints. We found evidence of Cordelia's forensic accountant's involvement. But the legal system moves slowly, especially when you're fighting people with unlimited resources and political connections. Meanwhile, life went on without me. The twins are 8 years old now. During a court hearing, Azara told the judge she didn't have a mother anymore. Dashiell had gotten engaged to a woman Cordelia had handpicked for him. A white woman from old money, exactly what his mother had always wanted. They were building a life together while I was fighting just to prove I wasn't a criminal. Then something shifted. My investigator found a whistleblower, an IT specialist who'd worked for Cordelia's forensic accountant. This man had terminal cancer and wanted to clear his conscience before dying. He came forward with everything: hard drives, email correspondence, recorded phone calls where Cordelia gave explicit instructions on how to frame me, voice memos where she laughed about destroying the black woman who'd contaminated her family bloodline. Then Sterling's brother had a breakdown. Consumed by guilt and facing his own legal troubles, he confessed everything. He brought bank records showing Cordelia's payments, text messages with her instructions, everything. Then the forensic accountant himself, facing federal charges for unrelated fraud, cut a deal with prosecutors and handed over every document proving Cordelia had orchestrated the entire scheme. The story exploded. International news. Federal investigation. Criminal charges against Cordelia for fraud, conspiracy, perjury, and witness tampering. And then the most shocking detail emerged. I wasn't the first. Cordelia had done this to 2 other daughters-in-law before me, both women of color. Both had been driven out of the family through elaborate schemes. One had fled the country to escape false charges. The other had spent 3 years in prison for a crime she didn't commit before her conviction was overturned. I was the 3rd victim, but I was the first one who'd survived to see justice. All charges against me were dropped. My record was expunged. Formal apologies were issued. The nonprofit reinstated me with full back pay and benefits. Criminal charges were filed against Cordelia. Dashiell's company stock crashed because shareholders discovered he'd used company resources to help cover up evidence when it first started surfacing. His fiancée left him immediately when the scandal broke. Apparently, she didn't want to be associated with a man who'd helped imprison an innocent woman. His business partners abandoned him. His empire crumbled. Cordelia's trial was brutal. Evidence of her racism, her manipulation, her calculated destruction of innocent women. She was convicted on 34 federal counts and sentenced to 23 years in federal prison. She's 67 years old. She'll die behind bars. Her own family testified against her. Her friends abandoned her. Everything she'd built was destroyed. Dashiell lost everything. His company went bankrupt. His fortune evaporated. His reputation was obliterated. He developed severe PTSD and substance abuse issues. The man who'd once been worth $4.2 billion was now living in a rental apartment, unemployed and broken. But the worst part was the children. Court-ordered reunification therapy began. Zion and Azara were 8 years old when they finally understood what had happened. They read the news articles. They heard the evidence. They realized they'd been manipulated their entire lives. Our first unsupervised visit, they both collapsed in my arms, sobbing. "Mommy, we're so sorry," Zion cried. "We said such terrible things to you and you didn't do anything wrong." Azara had nightmares about the bad Nana. She'd wake up screaming about being lied to. Both my babies needed intensive therapy to process the trauma of what had been done to them. I got full custody. The twins didn't want to see Dashiell. Their trust in him was completely destroyed. How could they forgive a father who believed lies over truth? Who chose his mother over protecting them? Who let an innocent woman go to jail? We'd lost 4 years. 4 years of Zion's childhood. 4 years of Azara growing up. I miss first communions, school plays, science fairs, birthday parties, lost teeth, first crushes, bedtime stories. Those years are gone forever. No amount of justice can bring them back. Dashiell showed up at my door one night, drunk and desperate. He fell to his knees on my porch, begging for forgiveness, begging for another chance, threatening to harm himself if I didn't take him back. I called the police. I had a restraining order filed. And I looked him in the eye and said, "You didn't just destroy my life, Dashiell. You destroyed our children's sense of safety and trust. You chose to believe a lie because it was easier than defending me. You'll live with that guilt for the rest of your life. Now get off my property before I have you arrested." I never saw him again. Today, 6 years after that nightmare began, I'm the chief operating officer of the largest educational nonprofit in the world. My twins are 12 years old now. Zion wants to be a federal prosecutor to help wrongly convicted people. Azara is in therapy but getting stronger every day. We're healing slowly, but we're healing. I started a foundation for wrongly accused mothers and fathers. 17 people came forward with similar stories of being framed by vindictive family members who weaponize the legal system. We're fighting to change laws, to create better safeguards against false accusations, to make parental alienation a recognized form of criminal abuse. I never remarried. The trust is just gone. But I found peace in my work, in my children, in my purpose. And then last year, Cordelia's attorney contacted me from prison. She wanted to see me. She wanted to apologize. I went. Not for her, but for me. I sat across from her in that visitation room, this shriveled, broken woman in a prison jumpsuit, and she told me everything. Dashiell's father had left her for a black woman 35 years ago. That woman had destroyed Cordelia's perfect life, or so she believed. So Cordelia made it her mission to destroy every black woman who came into her son's lives. She wanted revenge. She wanted us to suffer the way she'd suffered. "I'm sorry," she said. "I destroyed your life for something that had nothing to do with you." I looked at this pathetic woman and said, "You didn't destroy my life. You tried. But I'm still here. I'm thriving. My children know the truth. And you're going to die alone in this prison, knowing that all your hate accomplished was destroying yourself." I walked out and never looked back. So that's my story. 4 years of hell, but I survived. I came out stronger. And if you're going through something similar right now, false accusations, toxic family members trying to destroy you, legal nightmares that seem impossible to escape, please hear this. Document everything. Trust your truth. Don't you dare give up. The truth will come out. Justice might be slow, but it comes. Your children will know who you really are eventually. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something, please share it with someone who needs to hear it right now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because I share powerful real-life stories like this every week. Drop a comment telling me what would you have done in my situation. Would you have forgiven Dashiell? And remember, they can take your present, but they cannot take your future unless you let them. Stay strong. Keep fighting. The truth always wins in the end. Thanks for listening to my story. I'll see you in the next one.